Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Build and Thrive, the podcast that is dedicated to improving the health and the happiness of the construction industry. So we are back in the studio, and I am joined by a very special guest. And we're going to be talking predominantly about dust, which is a topic we've definitely spoken about on the podcast before. But actually today we're going to be talking about a real-life example about what organisations are doing to tackle some of the issues that we've seen. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Wilshire. Thank you for coming, Martin.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And Martin is the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Director for Multiplex. So, Martin, before we get started, let's just hear a little bit about your career and your journey and how you came to be where you are today.
Okay, so a very long time ago now, I started my working life in the Royal Air Force. So I come from a sort of quasi-military family and joined the RAF in 1989, 5 days after the Berlin Wall came down, interestingly, and spent 10 years in the military police, in the RAF police. When I left, I sort of had no real clear idea about what I was going to do, and I sort of fell into a job as a sort of contract supervisor for an installation company who did work on construction sites and in the domestic market, but also for big council projects, sort of energy efficiency measures. So I became quite good at that. I became a contracts manager, and that's when my interest in sort of health and safety took off, really, because I was dealing with a lot of challenges with predominantly men in vans driving around the countryside unsupervised and doing some fairly dangerous work at height and what have you. So there were a number of reasons why I got interested in the health and safety side. But I did that for 5 years, and then took the leap into health and safety and found myself on the Wembley Stadium project in 2005. So quite a change, quite a step change, really.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And that was heavy engineering. So there was an awful lot of health, health matters, involved in that work particularly. So that started to really sort of further sort of enhance my knowledge of health, not just the safety side. I have worked with a lot of people over the years who are, quite rightly focused on safety and see, health perhaps as secondary to that, because they spend all of their time trying to stop people getting physically hurt.
Absolutely.
And rightly so. So anyway, Wembley Stadium finished. I then joined a contractor, great company, spent 8.5 years with them, worked a lot in the cut and carve world.
Right. Lots of dust in there.
Absolutely. And also sort of new build and refurbishment work as well. And then 11 years ago now, I had an opportunity to join Multiplex, and I took it.
Still there to the day.
And the rest is history, absolutely.
Yeah. I suppose, let's come back and talk a little bit about the health journey, because I often talk to safety professionals, and they will say, I'm a safety professional, but I know I need to know more about health.
Absolutely.
How have you seen that journey in your own career? Obviously, you said that you've recognised and understood more about it, but have you seen the industry move in that same level of pace, perhaps your knowledge? Or
I think it fluctuates. I think it does. I think it's, we are we're a program-based world, aren't we? Where it's all about time and cost, due to the way we do business. And therefore we often have limited attention spans in terms of what are the things we can have maximum impact in the shortest time on. So it's understandable that we perhaps do sort of fluctuate around the whole health area. I mean, my personal experience is, when I was a contracts manager working for that installation company, I had my very first experience of working with a health and safety manager, because I'd come out of the Air Force and we'd only lost our Crown immunity in 97, I think it was, 1997. So I wasn't really familiar with any of that. We had a health and safety manager, an excellent guy, who I will always remember. And he came down to me one day and said, we've set up some occupational health monitoring for the lads, basically. And that included the pinprick test for hand-arm vibration. And we discovered that our most senior supervisor had latter stage hand-arm vibration.
Oh, wow.
So his results came back, and he essentially had white finger, and I could see, from understanding a bit more about him, because I work quite closely with him, how that was impacting his day-to-day life.
I bet.
He's dropping things a lot. He was, we withdrew him from the tools, and he was became a mobile supervisor. But ever since then, it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me, saying, "Hey, this stuff's really, really important. It has a massive impact on your life if if it becomes a problem for you, if you're diagnosed with something like that." And then sort of moving through into, construction. Wembley Stadium saw an awful lot of, welding. First time I'd ever seen air arc gouging, as an example, which is produces a huge amount of fume and everything else. And seeing some of the challenges around working in welding nests at height with with welding masks and scarves around faces and all of that sort of stuff back in the day. Back in the day. And working out, what should we be doing in that respect? What should we be doing? And then you sort of fast forward to today, really, where we're still faced with challenges around things like health surveillance, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Definitely, I'm sure,
And again, I think a lot of that is based around how we do business. If you sort of broadly look at the transference of risk, or rolling the risk downhill, as I call it, in terms of, you push the financial risk down. There are every aspect of, and every person or organisation involved in a construction project has a different, but it seems increasing, financial risk profile as you get down towards subcontractors and that, those layers of subletting that go on, where we end up in a state where, we've got an awful lot less visibility than we would like to have, of what's happening on a project. Who do we have? Again, one of those key core things of the Building Safety Act is about, competence. And that's one of those challenges, is how we're organised.
Yeah, absolutely.
How the industry is organised to do business. And then we talk about the psychosocial side of that and everything else. But ultimately what you will end up with is, you'll end up with a transient labour force where, they may be employed by somebody for a matter of weeks or months. And therefore the old established order of health surveillance looks like this can't be put in place.
How do you ever assure that it's done how you'd want to do it without? How
do employers chase people to get them to do things, etc. So it's a lot of the things, a lot of the imperfections and a lot of the challenges we have in our industry are firmly, ensconced in how we do business. I suppose in contrast that you think, well, we do it for safety, we should be able to find ways to make it better for health, but like you say, the immediate bit there is not always there, and it's not the same driver that's going to slow the program down. Absolutely. There are ways. But it's
we need to find what the ways.
But I think it's Arnold Schwarzenegger who says, if you have the will, the political will, and a plan, you can make things happen. And there's a few challenges around that kind of thing.
Yes, well, let's try and solve that as part of this podcast today. We're going to talk about mainly about Silica, because I think some of the work that Multiplex has been doing in this space, I haven't seen other organisations perhaps taking such a strong position on what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about Silica 25, the campaign, and how you got to deciding that was the topic that you really wanted to focus on from a health perspective.
Sure. So for quite a while, we've been running what we call HIT tours, health intervention tours, which was something I'd long been doing in one way or another, whether it be at my previous employer in the cut and carve world, which was around putting dust monitors and noise monitors on people, and seeing how our managers and the workers are exposed, etc., and just trying to keep an eye on that and raise the profile of that. When I came to Multiplex, and certainly moving into the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Director role, I had a really clear idea about what I wanted to do around collecting really informative leading indicators. And there are a lot of people who don't like that term. They think we're just talking about numbers and no action, but actually leading indicators are, if you can see what's going on, leadership have to be able to see, what's happening. And if we can pull that information directly to us as the leadership team in the Multiplex, then we have a really clear idea of, how we can set a course to avoid the icebergs, right? So essentially, the health intervention tours came about when I sort of brought Angie Brooker into the business, who's been fantastic on this.
Yeah, she's great.
And she's really, led this really strongly. Yeah. So what we do now is we collate information on all those positive interactions we've had with the workforce where things have been done well. There's a good level of understanding of what the health risks are. Yeah. There's a good level of understanding of how the work should be done and what levels of protection are required. And then you get any negative interventions, which are work either has to stop because there's no protection, or the protection is incorrect, or there's no knowledge, or things are being worn incorrectly. Whilst respirators are face fitted, they're not worn protected. There's only one strap, etc. All of those things,
typical things that you'll see.
So the whole gamut, really, of compliance and sort of non-compliance. So what we end up with in all of those main key topic areas is a dashboard that we look at, month on month, and it automatically tells us through the numbers what our biggest issues are. Right now, those are respiratory and noise. Yeah. Okay. Will be fairly standard for any construction company. I would say they're probably going to be the two biggest. Yeah. So very, very difficult, and it's a moving feast in terms of managing it. So our journey started with that data and seeing an ongoing struggle with workers with heavy beards, wearing FFP3, close-fitting masks.
Yep.
And I'm sort of staring at these, men who are wearing this equipment, thinking, in 2026, honestly, who doesn't know?
Yeah.
From a management perspective, if nothing else, that is not right. Yeah. And yet we are issuing that equipment to those men.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is wrong.
Yeah.
So alongside that, I'd been talking with my Australian team over there, and we talk, routinely every couple of weeks about prevalent matters.
Yeah.
And in late 2024, the Australian government banned artificial stone.
Yeah, it's a big move, big statement, wasn't it?
Big statement. Yeah. At around that time, I'd come across, with discussion with the Australian team, I came across a British Medical Journal article by Dr. Joanna Feary of the Royal Brompton Hospital.
Yeah, she's incredible.
And lungs at work, fantastic advocate. And that was a real eye-opener because that talked about Jo and her team's work around the discovery of the first 8 cases of accelerated silicosis in the UK.
Yeah.
And that is a devastating disease. And when they say accelerated, they are not joking. This is something that's, if people have in their heads, a sort of a time frame for the onset of chronic disease, most people probably say 40 years. 30 or 40 years, because that's typically what we've been taught,
absolutely,
right? 30, 40 years. Yeah. When you're talking about less than 10, for that to happen, or so.
And I've seen Joanna present, and the age demographics were younger men as well. They're not like these people 100%. That live close to reretirement. They were in their 30s.
Yes, and absolutely.
Yeah, it was.
And Angie's done some work where she's volunteered at the Royal Brompton with Joanna, and she's seen her consultations with her patients, and it's devastating.
Yeah, it's a shame Angie couldn't make it today, because I'm sure she would give that lived experience of it. And I'll make sure that we connect the stuff that Joanna's doing, because I think if anyone hasn't 100%. Seen the work she's doing and more detail on what she's discovered, that's enough to make more sense of what we're doing. If you need any more convincing.
100%. Yeah. And I think just to tidy that piece up around why we did what we did for Silica 25, I think it was that where we brought Joanna in sort of Angie and I spoke to Joanna and said, would you come and present to me and the other members of the leadership team for Multiplex UK business? And she agreed, and we all sat there and just, mouths open as she explained what the situation was with artificial stone, with the rising cases exponentially globally, which we've seen in the past, with other substances that have subsequently been banned and outlawed. Yeah. And we looked at it, and I think after Joe had left the room, I think we looked at each other, and it was our ops director, Andrew Ridley-Barker, who said, so what's hard about banning it then? And I don't mean that as any disrespect to, the manufacturers or, people whose livelihoods are made from, artificial stone, but we are talking about something which is, it's not about the controlled workplaces with good safety management structures and, good levels of management and good cultures. We're talking about, the sort of the aspects of, modern slavery comes into it very clearly.
I've seen some of the pictures Joanna shared of those conditions.
Her patients share photographs of those backstreet workshops where they are being given a surgical mask, for example, and they're wading around in dust, they're templating these for the end user, the customer. So, part of our Silica 25 program was to meet with some of our highest risk trades, the stonemasons, etc., and talk with them about their own experiences, both in terms of, how much do they know about where their material is coming from? Do they know how it's being templated and prepared? And, secondly, then we roll into the rest of the discussion, which is about, challenges with health surveillance. Do you offer any at the moment? Tell us what the challenges are so we can get a good idea of what those barriers are. But then we need to have another look and say, well, as Multiplex, what can we do with our supply chain that offers at least something, some form of, monitoring? And we teamed up with Asthma and Lung UK, and they've been doing, basic spirometry on some of our sites, and that's something that we want to carry on with.
A lot of the workers hadn't experienced that.
No, and there's, there's a little bit of, I was sort of hanging around and people walking around the corner and seeing me stood there, and I was genuinely talking to some of them just to convince them to go in and just try it, because it doesn't take long. It's 2 minutes. And Asthma and Lung, said have been brilliant actually, and they said to us there's a very high referral rate. It's like an 18% referral rate across all the sites that they do, on average of people probably not, finding something out from that basic spirometry that just needs to be investigated. It's not the same saying you've got a problem. It's just the results would suggest that they probably need to go and speak to a doctor in that respect. So we found that incredibly helpful as well. And the next part of it is then just looking at, I suppose, having those sort of frank discussions around, are you providing the right equipment for, men have got more facial hair than ever before. We know what good looks like. We know what bad looks like. What is the supply chain doing in that regard? Because we have had instances, as I've already said, where having challenged some of our supply chain on why people with beards are wearing close fit, disposable masks or semi-disposable masks, we're in a situation where the discussion turns to a fear that people will run away with expensive equipment.
I hear that a lot. And look after it,
and that's the reason why they don't invest in it. And yet, people don't run off with steps and podiums because they're asset managed. And the conversation is around we're not trying to preach or pretend we know more than other people, but this is a matter of life and death. Respiratory protection is a matter of life and death, and therefore it deserves the requisite level of asset management to reflect the seriousness of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you know what? A lot of our supply chain are doing a phenomenal job. They're doing a great job of this. We're really
used to it for other
100%. I mean, you go, you can go to, one of our projects I went to recently. Went to see the storm and all of that powered respiratory protection is available. It's all assigned to one individual.
Yeah.
And the cleaning regime is the maintenance regime. It's all there. It's all there, and that's huge, and that really lifts me up because we've got people who really, clearly at senior management level, know that it's a massive problem.
Yeah.
And know that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, incredible. So I suppose with the campaign, the focus I think was the engineered stone. So and
there's three prongs to the whole thing, really. So the first one is the ban on artificial stone, which we've said as a business we will no longer put into new projects after late 2025. So all new projects starting.
And how was well received by?
Well, I think there was a little bit of there was a bit of nervousness. I don't think there was no issue within the business. I think externally there were questions, and there were obviously some discussions which I think our ops director fielded a few from our clients, etc. There was a bit of trepidation, a bit of fear, but I thought I have to give full credit to the leadership team because they've really stuck to their guns on this and said no, it's killing people, and we have to do something about it.
Absolutely.
And it's like anything else, it's over. We're incredibly resourceful as the human race because the minute a dynamic within a market changes, then basically the aspiration to seek a better, safer alternative happens.
Yeah.
It just does. It always has done.
As construction, we find our ways around.
Correct, exactly. And that's the same as, the industry and the market generally. You'll find another way. And there are alternatives out there. And we give out a sort of guidance sheet now to our supply chain and our designers, which very much reflects the Australian government decision paper. So I chose to look before we made this. Once we'd said what's hard about banning it, I went and read cover to cover the Australian decision paper to make sure we understood, and our technical leads and head of design understood what we were talking about when we said what we are banning. Yeah. So there's variations of that. There are. It's like anything else. The very best thing to do is to engage with us on that, so we can talk about it. Because it's the Australian decision paper structured it really, really well, and made it very clear. And they talked about lower silicon alternatives. And basically, predominantly, what types of sort of workpiece we're talking about? Slabs and bench tops, worktops, etc. That kind of thing. So I think overall it's something that I've received a bit of feedback on, but we're resolute in this. We're absolutely resolute.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, first one, the
artificial stone. The second one was about making sure we got the right respiratory protection for everybody, and that's actively, being seen through our HIT tours as well as the audits that we do, etc. But it's not all about that. It's all about actually talking to the supply chain and working through issues with them.
And have they predominantly all gone to the air-fed respirators? It's the easier.
A lot of them have.
Expensive,
a lot of them have. That's definitely on the rise, which is great to see.
Yeah, amazing.
But there are still pockets of, still the sort of traditional way of doing things, which is buy a box of disposables or semi-disposables, which if you do the basic maths on a box of those versus. Yeah, and you use them as you should do. You're giving them out every day.
Yeah. And how is the Multiplex team then? So is that been really now because of the principles you've got? That's really been enforced and embedded. I think one of the challenges I often see is people know it, but they don't ever challenge that when they see it out on site. So you finding that management is
it doesn't work unless you've got the backup of the likes of Angie, my health and safety managers on the projects going around and really sort of helping with that. But we are really encouraged by what our wider project teams are doing and seeing out there.
Absolutely,
it's very good. Yeah,
amazing.
It's really good. Yeah.
Okay, well, and I think, we're talking hierarchy of controls. You'd rather start at other things, but you've done one bit of elimination, which is good. And actually, unfortunately, we do rely so heavily on RPE. So and I think again from my experience, that's the one thing that if you could wave your magic wand and just say, right, let's change that. You know that you've protected people a lot more. Obviously, you can remove more things would be better. But
correct, absolutely.
And the third one?
The third one is the discussion around health surveillance, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
a challenging discussion.
Where are we? Yeah. Where are we in terms of the contractor's relationship with health surveillance? If they do provide it, What does that look like?
Yeah.
How do you do it? Because genuinely, this is not us sort of testing the subcontractor. This is us genuinely wanting to know how you do it. We, at the end of the day, we're a management organisation. Or as my managing director would put it, we are an integrator. So, we integrate all the moving parts and all the contractors to build. It's them that build. Yeah, we are the integrator. We are the middleware, as he would call it, which is quite right, actually. Yeah. So we cannot profess to know what it's like to employ people, tradespeople, and have to wrangle with those day-to-day issues, okay? Because we don't, and we shouldn't ever profess to do so. What we should do is sit down with people and listen to what they tell us and educate us about what those challenges are, so that we can then, at the relevant points in time, sometime later this year, hopefully, we can sit down with a larger group of them and say, okay, what is it that we're going to do? And it might cost all of us a bit to make it happen, but it gives access to some form, even if it's that basic spirometry.
So we can find those people that need that help.
So we can just routinely have some form of check on site, which at least, gives somebody an idea as to whether they need to get something investigated or not. And that's really it. That's really as far as it goes.
What's some of the early conversations been like from the supply chain? I know it's been the focus of the HSE really over the last year or so, where they're trying to uncover, probably ask similar questions to what you, maybe in a slightly different way, but that there's such a mixed response, and
there is. I think there's a really common thread that sort of comes through, and that is it's all about the, again, how we do business. It's the current market.
Yes.
And if you think about, I think last year I read in one of the construction papers, in the construction press anyway, there was a further reduction of directly employed personnel, the frontline construction personnel, something like 20%. Or something like that. Right, a big number. Wow. I can't remember if that's right, so don't quote me on it. But what we're seeing is an increase in indirectly employed labour. Yeah. And the more that happens, the more that you're going to get sort of transitory workers through organisations. Yeah, absolutely. And when that happens, that is the start of that sort of revolving door, as we say, where you have less and less opportunity as an employer to... What do you do with a baseline? When do you do baseline health surveillance for somebody who's going to be with you for, 6 weeks, 2 months, finishing off a job, something like that? Absolutely. Where does that go? Yeah. And the cost of that, and that's the challenge you have to do. Well, if I'm going to do this, they might be gone in 2 weeks, and how do we manage that? Absolutely, yeah. So those are really it is the same challenges that everybody has around just retaining labour. I think. Yeah. And I suppose with the workers and their perspective, obviously you've been doing the stuff with Asthma and Lung UK, and as you said, many haven't ever had their lungs checked. What was their reaction to doing it? I know sometimes it's a bit, we're just ticking the box, health and safety, we've gone mad and doing way too much. But surely, I mean, maybe I'm biased, but from a worker's perspective, if there's a company here wanting to make sure my health is okay so I don't die, I'm hoping they're open to that as an avenue for supporting them, not seeing it as, another little bit of compliance that they don't like to do. I think there's, I think it's very much like, there's sort of like the 20-60-20. There's the top 20% who are the first through the door. Yeah. There's the middle 60% who are the biggest ones you need to convince, but they'll generally go, towards it. And then you've got your hardline bottom 20% who just would walk away from going, not interested, don't know what you're trying to do, but I've got my suspicions or whatever. But they're just a bit fearful, I think, and that's standard. That's a standard thing with anything medical, right? So absolutely, what are they going to do with this information? Am I going to lose my job? Absolutely. But I'd also say, not even from running that sort of spirometry, but the dust sort of awareness and the dust road shows that we have on projects. Yeah. I'm always incredibly encouraged to see, the men and women from the workface turning up and looking at what kit is available and really taking an interest in it, trying it on. And you genuinely see at that point, you say, they look, they all care a great deal about their health.
Of course, yeah.
And, today as well, you've got to consider, I'm an oldie now, but, you've got to consider generational change as well in terms of attitudes towards your health as well. And
absolutely.
I think with, when you see a group of, young people out on a weekend and they're having lunch and there isn't a spot of alcohol being drunk, I find that miraculous, frankly.
Yeah.
But there is such a shift in people's focus on their health and lifestyle now.
I agree. Yeah.
That's something that we can capitalise on in terms of this.
Yeah.
Because there is that genuine, drive to want to know more and to do things. And if we can somehow dovetail that with what we're trying to do,
absolutely,
then that can be encouraged.
Yeah, I definitely have experienced the same thing with and I was talking to a young engineer the other day, and her knowledge on health, and I was like, okay, so they've taught you quite a lot of this stuff at university. I think there's this perception that we still don't talk about it, but she understood it, and she didn't see the difference between safety. She was just like, well, I do exactly the same. So I was like, the things are starting to improve, which is really reassuring. So with the Silica 25, obviously we're now 2026. What's the plans for?
I think we've just got to keep it. We've got to keep it going. I mean, we've
you
had.
Can't solve it overnight.
No, I mean we've had a number of discussions. We've still got to have quite a few more discussions with our supply chain, and we've got to sort of get on with those this year, particularly. And I would like to be in a position at some point later this year when we can perhaps agree on, a way in which we can achieve, some form of, broader. Just a provision that we can provide people on site where they've got access to, some level of checking, really.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I think there was something you sent me some notes and one of your questions, and I'm sorry if I'm doing this out of turn.
Oh, no, it's fine. I've not followed any questions.
It was one of your things that said if you could wave a magic wand, what would it be? What in relation to health, and I say national construction testing, pathway, really. I think, a standardised approach from government, that recognises construction health as a big risk.
And it isn't the burden on society, the burden on the NHS. So if you quantify it, there's a clear business case to do that.
There is.
Yeah.
We need a sustainable workforce, number one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Some of the other things that we're doing around culture and safety, particularly at Multiplex, is, we have the One Life, One Team program, which was sort of something where I sort of cobbled together some of the best things that people were doing around the projects in Multiplex and elsewhere that I've worked, and we put those together because we want to build trust, and we want to build that relationship, break down that barrier between management and workforce, and make sure that they know that we are authentically putting their best interests at heart, and that we want them to work in a safe environment, and we want to provide that environment where not only do they feel safe, but actually they feel they have agency, they are empowered. I know it's a commonly used word, but they have agency to be able to say, I don't actually want to do that, is there a better way of doing this?
Absolutely.
So that's really the top and bottom of what will give rise to everything else. But back to that one, waving that magic wand thing. We cannot rely on the health and safety executive and the enforcement model forever, because that's just not the reality. They can't be everywhere.
No.
They are very limited in how many people they have, their funding, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. It genuinely falls to all of us as employers to come together around the table and say, how do we make this happen?
Yeah.
Asthma and Lung UK have really educated Angie and I when we've been at their events in the Houses of Parliament, particularly about the funding issues, obviously within the NHS, on respiratory health nationally, and this is talking to somebody in the sort of forum there. We were just chatting, and I was educated that's only our problem with respiratory health in construction is only really a reflection of the issues around respiratory health nationally. Right.
Yeah.
And around its, I think somebody said to me, it's the third biggest killer in the country.
Wow, yeah.
Respiratory health, or respiratory ill health is the third biggest killer in the country. And perhaps that is part of that same conversation around the fact that there is going to be, that's interlocked a lot of people, work in construction, manufacturing, etc., and they are, bringing that home. That's so. If we were able to have that national screening, construction screening, I think that would be the one thing I would like to see before I move off this mortal coil, if you like.
Right, well, another 5 years, we can get that one up. No, and I agree with you, and I sit in many working groups, as I'm sure you do yourself, where the industry's coming together, and I've sat in those groups for 15 years now, and still saying very similar things. Something different's got to happen to really see the change. So let's hope. But we keep hearing stories like what Multiplex are doing, and passionate people driving change. I think is going to take us in a certain direction, but we just need to more action, less talking, I think is correct. Is the key thing.
Exactly that.
I am going to touch on mental health and psychosocial risk, because we had a chat obviously before we started recording, and with Multiplex being a Australian originally. We've been talking a lot on the podcast about psychosocial risk management. What does it look like for us in the UK, and particularly in construction? But obviously in Australia, they have legislation already in place around psychosocial risks. So we haven't got a huge amount of time, but let's touch on it slightly. How are you seeing the impact of what's happening in Australia, and how it's affecting the business, also in Australia, but also in the UK?
I think I will be honest, we hadn't used the term psychosocial risk before. It was probably 3 years ago. It was probably a conversation with my ESG chairman, Dennis Ells in Australia, who we chat regularly every fortnight or so, and he started talking about psychosocial risk particularly. And I was very interested in that because of, everything we've done, in my tenure, particularly around culture and around, trying to why do we try and make people feel at ease, and, why do we try and provide a, safe, desirable workspace on multiplex projects? Well, the reason for that is because we want to alleviate the psychosocial risks that eventually are sort of at some point will weigh down on, that the hard hat of the supervisor who's going to make a bad decision. And really it sort of chimed with me quite strongly that I years ago had been in that situation several times, where you are basically left to make a decision based on the way that the organisation you work for has structured the way it does things, which means that you're then left open to somebody not paying for something, or somebody deciding it's too expensive, or everything. As I said earlier, everything revolves around time and cost.
Absolutely.
And in the end, you will always get a psychosocial pressure, or a workplace stressor might be a good word for it. That results in somebody making a bad decision. Essentially.
Absolutely.
And I do recall reading a very old HSE guide from around about 2003, 2004, maybe, that first mentioned psychosocial risk, I think. And it just said that all workplace stresses, as it's otherwise known. And it's kind of, when you think of it like that, you can then understand why, from board level down, how you organise your business to run creates positive and negative.
And it's logical. I mean, I don't think you need to fully appreciate what psychosocial risk management looks like. You can all relate to those examples of what it means to in a day-to-day environment. I had someone previously say to me, I think I need to label it something different. Let's not call it psychosocial risk. It's too confusing. I'm like, well, what?
It creates a bit of eye rolling, when you mention it.
Is the amount of times we've got to call it. Let's call it well-being. I'm like, what does well-being actually mean? And then you now go down a rabbit hole of trying to define what it actually means. But logically, it's quite transparent. So, is the Australian side of the business seeing the benefits of the legislation? Is it driving positive change in the country?
I think there's a lot of positive stuff going on. Certainly, I think I've felt. That there's a lot of things that they do in Australia that are incredibly forward-thinking, and they're not, and the way they think is very different to the way we think in terms of their sort of openness to challenging certain things. And I think we talked previously about, Helen Lingard and Michelle Turner's work on health and wellbeing in construction, which is a fantastic book. which really, really sort of unpacks what that all means, what that psychosocial piece actually means, and whether that's, the risks faced by women on site in construction and the studies that have been done around that, which people don't tend to talk about, all the way through to, like we said earlier, all of those other sort of organisational factors that can do that. Yeah. They have, been looking at that for quite a while, and, they are, they're definitely on a positive trajectory in that space, I would say. Yeah.
I know I haven't read Helen's book, but she, her and I have exchanged comments on LinkedIn before, and she spoke about using the term pressure test in a project. And I was like, just again, it's a language that we can understand, but what are the pressures that are going to happen on this project? We know the program's tight, we know the client might not be the easiest client to work with, and again, logical things. And I do feel that in the UK we've still got this fear of what uncovering or opening the can of worms. I hear it regularly. What if we open this? What are we going to do? We're never going to be able to go to work again. It's like, well, if that was the same for safety, everything's there's a risk in a lot of the work we do for safety. We wouldn't say let's never do it again. It's just finding those ways to move forward. And 45,003, is it recognised in Australia as a way of demonstrating their compliance with the legislation to get ISO 45003, or is that not such a common kind of practice?
At the moment, I'm not sure. Yeah. At the moment, I think I've looked at it, and it will be something for us in the longer term, I think, to sort of head towards. I don't think there's enough auditors yet.
Yes,
in
we
the country.
Beforehand.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we've had mixed feedback on the level of what detail, and what they're looking at in terms of the audits. Yeah. I know Stuart, who works in my team, he's like, well, why don't they just integrate it with 45,001? Why should it be a separate thing? We manage health and safety risk. So hopefully that will be something that will happen in the not too distant future, which means more organisations will be doing this as standard, not as a nice to have. And
there is actually, if you, I would say that if you have 45,001, there will be an awful lot of stuff you're already doing.
Yes, absolutely. I think that I know BSI had said at some point it's about 75%. If you've got 45,001, you are 75% of the way there. So you just got to tweak it slightly, I think. But culturally, that's. Maybe a big step with that leadership understanding and that commitment to what does this actually mean.
And I think that's really important, right? Because it is about the fact that whenever people talk about 45,001 and 45,003, it's a framework. What you've got to do as leaders of an organisation is you've got to want to understand it in the first place. Not, you don't just get the certificate and it's good for bids and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. You've got to want to understand it. And it goes back to that basic premise we talked about at the start, which was, around, why is health important to you or important to me? And there is a question around, health being important to organisations. And ultimately any organisation will be as focused and as driven as the people around that top table want to be or are about any given subject. And that differs from person to person.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of that is underestimated. Yes. In terms of leadership.
Yeah. And I suppose when you look at the industry, I know there's some industry groups trying to do more in this space, and the awareness around like the suicide stats and why we need to do more is. I don't. Again, it's a bit like coming back to who doesn't know the dust is bad. There's a small handful of people that might not know the impact of dust. I think most people know a lot, maybe not know the exact statistics, but they know that there is a challenge around suicide in construction. But again, what is the action that businesses and the industry is going to take? And one of the common challenges I see back, it's an industry problem. It's an industry problem. The way that we tender for jobs, the way that we procure our labour, we can't solve it as an organisation. But I suppose for Multiplex, you've proven, like from the Silica perspective, there are things that you can do, and doing nothing, the absence of doing nothing is not going to take us anywhere. So what are the things that it looks like?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, so hopefully we've solved all of the industry's challenges in this 45-minute chat. And so just to finish up, what's the thoughts in the next few years at Multiplex, talking about health generally? Silica's the big one you're trying to get on top of. Is there any other kind of big plans of where things are going? Or
I mean, I think we will we will just redouble our efforts just on the silica piece. I think that is a big one. I know there's a lot of discussion about musculoskeletal risk as well.
Yeah, I know.
I think that is, very challenging. I'm very, pleased to see, some of the technological advancements that have happened now. On the 50 Fenchurch Street project, I'm informed that we will have, lift shaft drilling robots active there.
Wow.
Which looks pretty incrable, to be honest.
I haven't heard about this. This is another podcast episode on live
pretty
filming.
Good. Yeah, don't ask me.
At
this stage.
People. Wow.
But
robots are coming.
I mean, it's the Hilti Jibot has been very successful in terms of the drilling the soffits out. Using computer software, etc., for it to plot where it's doing it, so you don't get, all right, that's not a person doing that, and that might not be seen as good from some people's point of view. But if you can not have people in lift shafts drilling out, drilling holes, amazing, then you are, creating a much better risk profile. In that respect, you are. Again, robotics and the sort of exoskeletons and things like that is I think there's a lot of work to do on that yet. We're not, I think, whatever we can take from great manufacturing examples, some of your great car manufacturers and the things they've done have been really, really fascinating and really progressive in what they've done. But they're in a static world. They're in a production line environment, static world, fairly static workforce as well. So kind of a lot of embedded knowledge there as well, and skills, etc. We have a very, very different challenge to all of that. So I think for us, it's just making sure that we thoroughly, keep our ear to the ground, as it were. We keep an eye on what's going on. We let other industries inform us. We let our supply chain inform us of what they're doing. Any information is good information, and we just hopefully continue to put good strategies and plans together. But one thing that is for sure is that we will not take our foot off the pedal as far as health is concerned.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's amazing. And I will have Angie come back because sometimes, meeting another nurse and we
of course.
It would have been a different dynamic. We probably would have got very clinical for some bit, but so I do miss that. So we'll have Angie back and we'll get her opportunity to share the great work that she's been doing in her perspectives. But Martin, thank you so much. And
you're very welcome.
Please come back and share more about the Silica campaign. And hopefully there are some other organisations listening to this that will say, right, well, actually, what is the steps that we can take? It might not be, as dramatic as some of the stuff that Multiplex has done, but one thing will make a big difference in the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much for sharing and thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, everyone, for listening.